The Jane Byrne Interchange in Chicago is one of the busiest and most complex highway junctions in the US, handling nearly 400,000 vehicles every day. Known for its constant congestion and years of reconstruction, it's a true test of urban infrastructure. In this video, we're taking on the challenge of rebuilding it in Cities Skylines 2, balancing realism, functionality, and hopefully we'll keep the traffic moving. Let's see if we can make it work. Most of this build was done live on Twitch. If you want to see more of my creations come to life in real time or just hang out and chat, then Twitch is the place to be. I'll link the channel below, so hit the follow button and I'll see you when we're live. So I wanted to kick things off here by not starting with the actual interchange itself, but rather I'm going to be doing the street level roads that sort of surround it. I thought it was probably a best idea just to kind of get the scale right, and really it would be kind of difficult if we did it the other way around. It does have the added benefit though that everything will be sort of kept within a predefined area, and it definitely helps just keeping the scale right, and it also helps with the orientation of some of the roads below it as well. So as is usual with these builds, I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up. We'll get the I-90 in first, and then we'll get the I-290 in. The one tip, if you're trying to build these kind of interchanges yourself, when it has several big curves on it, get those in just as soon as you can and get them in with semicircles. So try and spot where you can see sort of half circles and get them in place. Once they're in place, it's usually just a case of figuring out how to connect the ramps, and it's usually fairly straightforward. So the orientation and at least the initial heights on the overpasses are pretty much what you want to get done once you've got the lower levels in place. And here's a timely example here. We have the curve in place already. We've got an extra lane on the highway, and it's simply a case of just connecting it nice and simply with a complex curve. Now, to enable more connections on the ramps, we're going to upgrade the highway there, give it a few extra lanes, and we've got a couple of potential areas where we can connect more roads. Now, this curved overpass needs to go under, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a couple of markers just with some additional roads, and we're going to redraw the curve in. So there we have it, nice and flat, and again we're going to copy that process, or repeat that process rather, and we're going to bring it down to ground level here, and we should be left with a pretty decent looking underpass that matches up with exactly the curve that was there before we deleted it. So I think that is looking pretty good. Now we can move on to the road that's going to run kind of parallel to this loop that we've been working on. Now you see me adjusting this here, it didn't quite go in first time, and sometimes keeping this kind of stuff in the video can be kind of useful if you're trying to figure out how to just get these ramps in and get them nice and smooth. Then you can kind of see how I go about doing it. So really all that's happening here is I'm just taking the start of the ramp and the end of the ramp back a little bit. So to do that, just draw a little marker, delete the road, and hopefully once we've done that in both sections, we should be able to get a nice smooth connection. And now we can take a little bit of a closer look at it. That is looking pretty good as well, so happy with that one. I think we can move on. Perfect. So I'm going to use the road builder mod here just to get some extra lanes on our highways. It's a pretty substantial highway network, so 5 lanes and 6 lanes are going to be required for this build. So with those additional lanes in place now, we can kind of hook up another ramp, which is another one off the list here. So I want to split this big highway, and we'll take several lanes off here, and we're going to take 2 here, and then we're going to have 2 going directly right eventually as well. Let's just extend these lot out, and we can get these connected as well. It'll be fairly straightforward. They're all on the ground, so we shouldn't have too much work to get these things up and running. Now this isn't the final result, if you like, for these ramps. I just wanted to get them in place first. We'll get stuff operational, and we'll get the traffic moving and make sure everything works as expected. We prepared this elevated highway earlier on, so we have got a simple direct right turn. We are going to just peel it off the highway first, and then we can have 2 lanes going down below. And then we're going to use our complex curve again, and we're going to hook up the elevated ramp that we kind of chopped the end off earlier on. We want to try and keep as much of that semicircle as possible, but sometimes we do need to chop a little bit off just to make things fit. So didn't get a good connection first time. Second time around though, that is looking significantly better. So I'm pretty happy with that. Now we do have this on the elevated connection, and honestly I'm just past caring about it. I think I've said that a few times in my video. I'm not stressing out about it. I would rather have the nice connection coming off the road, and I just live with that, you know. But we'll keep things safe for our Sims. We'll give them a little safety barrier, and yeah, what could go wrong with that scene? So with this next ramp was a little bit tricky. We have a pretty steep decline that's coming off this particular ramp, and we need to try and get it right underneath the the other overpass, which is basically at the same height. So to get around this, as a little workaround, I'm just going to bring down the ramp a little bit in terms of overall height. We should be able to sneak it in there just underneath, and it did actually go in pretty nicely as well, so I've got no complaints on that one. Now remember, if we have to go in and make a few adjustments with Move It on the individual pillars and just make the the changes in elevations a little bit smoother, then never a problem. Easy fix, and it does make quite a bit of a difference when you do it sometimes, especially if it's looking a little janky on those changes of elevation. Now where I'm upgrading this to a 2-lane, on the real life one, the 2-lane kind of starts here where I'm showing you now, but to get a ramp in, and I'll kind of demonstrate, it's just super tricky to try and get the curves in just the way that I wanted to. So any connections that would have kind of taken the ramp off, in a completely different angle, and it would have changed the overall look of the interchange. So the solution there was just to really just extend where we have the 2 lanes and bringing it a little bit towards the ramp made sense. And doing it this way, we can just get a nice curve that kind of looks the part. So let's just try that again. Complex curve again. So it wasn't playing nicely, it didn't want to go in with a smooth connection. Also, it was pretty steep as well. So again, best thing to do, take it back, downgrade the road. Let's try and pull the ramp out with the complex from a little bit further back. It's still 7%, which is kind of steep, and it does look a little bit janky. So what we're going to do is just shift it about a little bit, remove it, and hopefully we can get something looking a little bit better. So we use manipulation mode, we'll use the normal mode, and we'll have a little rejig of some of the elevations here. And all going well, once that last one is done, we should be left with a relatively smooth looking curve and with decent changes in elevation. So let's just take stock of where we are so far. So we've got all the ramps connected in terms of the overpasses, apart from this one, which is on the left hand side of the screen. Other than that, we have 4 direct right turns that we need to go from highway to highway as well. Once we get the main interchange done, I couldn't help myself, I wasn't really planning on doing it, but I'm going to get all the little highway on and off ramps coming off the main road below as well. The direct right turns are really straightforward. You just create the marker, add your extra lane, hook them up with a simple curve. Super simple. Now this one did look a little ugly, so I just took a section out and redid the curve, and that made quite a nice difference there. I noticed that the highway to the south here didn't quite have the separation. There will be a couple of buildings going in the middle here, so I wanted to accommodate that and make sure that we've got a bit of space for those buildings a little bit later on in the build. So again, another direct right turn here, same sort of idea. We just upgrade the lanes, connect them in with a simple curve, and we're good to go. As I was happily building along, I actually noticed that one of these roads that make up the square, they actually go underneath the highway rather than over it. So what I decided to do is to redraw it, get it on ground level, and for the roads that are running east to west, we're just going to be bringing them down on a little slope. There's just enough clearance for the roads underneath, which is perfect. But yeah, I'm glad I noticed it then, and not too late in the build. For the highest ramp, the one that we've kept to the end, this will be the top one. We're going to draw it in, just make sure that we're happy with the actual curvature of it, and I think that's looking pretty good. Then what we're going to do is we're going to chop it up and we're going to redraw, and it's simply just to make sure that we can get a nice smooth decline coming over here, and the traffic will be going the other way. It will be an incline, I guess, as the traffic comes on, but I definitely want this one to be nice and smooth, and if it's looking a little bit janky, you're absolutely going to notice it. But I think we did a pretty good job there, and more often than not, it's usually just to delete it and redraw it. Obviously you can use Move It, we've used Move It a few times on the ramps, but if we can get a nice smooth one in one go, then really that's going to be the preferred method. So I'll just take a little minute here and get a couple of the other direct right turns connected, and this one was super simple. It was just a simple curve again, dead easy, and this end of the big ramp is going to be sort of similar. Now I did think, can we get it back in with a complex? Wasn't going to quite work. I had to kind of bring this one over first. We'll get the initial sort of direction ready, if you like, and then we'll do our usual. We'll create the extra lanes and see if we can try and pop this in at the end. So other than that, then we've got a couple more connections just to kind of complete it. We will be getting traffic on here very soon, which is always exciting. Now you can see this ramp, it did look a little bit of a jump down in elevation there, so we can certainly smooth that out. So in this scenario, we are going to use Move It, and we just individually bring the nodes down. And now we're on to the final section before we get traffic on here. We want to connect this big ramp. Again, we'll just shift it down a little bit, we'll move it and get that nice and smooth. Perfect, that's looking pretty uniform, I think. So let's pull this one out. And again, we're going to be grabbing the road builder tool again. I think I put that in as an 8-lane highway. We can obviously adjust that. We've got 4 lanes here. We're going to be adding 2, so we only need it to be a 6-lane. And then just like that, we've got a working interchange. And always a satisfying moment when we get stuff moving on here. So originally I thought about maybe just leaving it there, but you know, in retrospect, it was just not going to be the right decision. I think I absolutely had to put the additional lanes in and the additional part of the interchange. It just wouldn't have looked right. If we were using this as a 4-way interchange, then that would pretty much be the build done and dusted. But it had a couple of lanes that basically don't do anything because, taken out of context, the extra lanes basically don't function here. However, once we add these extra ramps on, the ones that connect to the kind of local roads, it kind of makes a bit more sense, and there are certain routes that can only be accessed from certain ramps. So we're going to build them, and then we're going to try and make it look a little bit pretty as well. Now on this part of the video, you might notice that there's a little bit of a border around the screen, and there in the bottom right hand corner, there's going to be some pop-ups as well. So for some reason, my OBS decided to record my entire stream and not just the game source, not just Cities Skylines. So yeah, apologies for that, but in case you're wondering why there are pop-ups, that's basically the reason why. So here what I wanted to do was really just draw out the main containers, if you like, you know, for the interchange, the local roads. We used some of the terrain tools and we brought the levels up here, and then what we did was just simply use the road tools and we'll make it a ground connection rather than elevated. So there will be quite a number of bridges to be put in here, just like the real life one if you have a little look on Google Maps or whatever. It actually took quite a bit figuring out exactly how to connect all of these things, and we were kind of constantly tabbing in and out of Google Maps on the live stream, but I think we managed to make a fairly decent job of it right enough. Now, it probably isn't perfect, and it's not going to be a one-to-one recreation, remember. There might be 1 or 2 ramps missing, there might be 1 or 2 extra ramps, who knows, but I think I've got it fairly close to what's in the real one. So as we get through this section and we get the individual on and off ramps all sorted out on both sides of the highway, there's really not too much to explain. It's fairly self-explanatory, so I'll let this run for about 60 seconds, 90 seconds or so, and then I'll catch up with you once we're on to the next section. So as you can see in this shot, we've got the full highway network sorted. There's no more to do with on-ramps, off-ramps, or anything like that. So the next step of this video is really just to get a background, and I'm going to try and create something similar-ish to Chicago. It's not going to be, again, it's not going to be a one-to-one recreation, but I will try and use the same types of densities and the same sort of overall shape of buildings that you generally find in that part of the city. I'm going to plunk down some of the biggest assets. This big one from the EE pack is phenomenal, isn't it? I'm going to have a little bit of industry, I'm going to have some housing, I'm going to have some offices as well. So the plan of action here was to use an old mod, which was the infinite demand mod. Super useful for when I was building interchanges and there were one-off builds. You could get essentially just like an empty city built in the background with really just a click of the finger. All you really needed to do is just zone and the buildings would populate. Nobody would move in, but that's fine. It wasn't a real city, it was just for background to the interchange is all I was after. And sadly I did try and use it. You'll see the results in just a minute, but I know development on that mod stopped some time ago and it hasn't been updated, and there's the warning there on Skive, but it seemed to work okay last time I used it, but it looks like it's done for, unfortunately. So kind of had to go around and do this the usual way. I did try Demand Pro, but I'll be honest, I don't really know what I'm doing with that mod, and changing the values didn't seem to have too much of an effect. So here you see the infinite demand mod working, and this is pretty much what it does. It just fills up every bit of zoning that you've put in, and it does it very rapidly. So it did seem to do its job. I thought it was going to do everything, but once we hit a certain point, it just stopped filling in the gaps, which is really unfortunate. So what was left to do then was to go and plop a whole ton of buildings and fill a big gap. And I have to say, I did underestimate how long that was going to take me. So now have a look at the maps. There's pretty good mix of plenty of parks, car parks, buildings, different shapes, different sizes. So I tried to get a nice little variation in here when I was filling up the gaps, Now in this video I'm not going to spend too much time at all showing you how we kind of finished off the build and did some basic sort of detailing. Really all we're going to be doing is putting down a few surfaces, a few trees. We're going to use a bit of oak, and then we're going to use some of the smaller trees on the tree palette. Once we've got that done, some of the dirt decals, again, just the usual kind of stuff I will tend to do to give a little bit of contrast between the ground and the trees and the built environment. Then once we've got that done, it's really just a case of plugging the gaps. Wherever we've got a bit of space, we want to stick something on it. I don't want just bare grass on there. And of course, we've got a little bit of an opportunity to make some of the industrial stuff a little bit nicer, with a little splash of colour with the trucks there as well. And the last thing to add is just some of our oaks. I'm going to sink these into the ground, and they're going to be some nice bits of shrubbery. So now we can take a few minutes, sit back, and we can enjoy having a look at this beast of an interchange. It was really nice to finally get this one done. This is probably one of the most requested interchanges that we have on the channel. We can take a nice long look at the extended network of highway roads, all the ramps on and off, and they're all pretty much bang on what you'll find on the real life one. All that extra time we took at the end to put in the additional buildings and the additional car parks, the industry, all the little bits of trees and the dirt really all kind of come into play now, don't they? I did try and keep the kind of detailing type part to a minimum here. Really it was more about the roads than anything else. But it is quite nice being able to take a real up close look and see what we've got there, and super satisfying watching the traffic do its thing. From the other angle you can see the real contrast between the different uses of buildings here. That H-shaped building is looking wild. I should have hidden that with a bit of tree, but hey ho. Listen guys, if you've enjoyed the video, learned anything new, got any value from it, do us a favour, hit a like, and don't forget, Twitch channel, if you haven't subscribed, go and do that now. That's it from me. I'll see you next one guys, take care of yourselves.